All right, welcome back, everyone. It is Monday again, reset day. So this is the 9th week, business as usual. Last week they had the change, so weeklies are 25 currency, and then they tweaked a bunch of other things, but largely irrelevant to whatever I'm interested in covering. So we're just gonna be doing our usual daily routines. Last week was also the week we celebrated the 12th year, right? 12th year of Neverwinter. It's despite being at I would say, a very lukewarm period of the new module and the new module in general. For me personally, I've already voiced my somewhat concerning matters when it comes to where the lifespan or projected lifespan. I, in my opinion, still feel like the large majority of module 31 is demonstrating that they are content with retaining the status quo as opposed to taking some very noticeable initiatives to perhaps turning in a new direction. And also it seems like over the past week, like the weeks of the module, there has been some quality control issues, right? Miscommunications, mislabeling. There's this very noticeable disconnect between those who are disseminating information and those who are, I guess, doing the back end stuff, or maybe even the end user side of things. In addition, there was a recent thing about Neverwinter's forums closing down, right? Or like basically moving to the Discord. So recently I hopped into Discord, and sure enough, it hasn't really changed all that much in my opinion. And it's like a gallery filled with individuals shooting theories at each other. So very, very standard stuff. I thought I'd share that a little bit. Spent a little 2 or 3 days reading, catching up with stuff, and it's not my scene. I think there is a very, very orthodox, dogmatic cultivation of closed environment personalities and thinking when it comes to how live service works. And I talked a lot about that because I spent most of my time recently playing Phantom X in this time slot. But as per usual, I want to wrap up the Neverwinter stuff, and it will be another 3 months, 3 months or 4 months, see where they end up taking. But it's a stark contrast. I think it's one thing to try to take risks, but definitely I can understand their choices and whatnot, because generally speaking, if you look in the Discord, read the Discord, generally speaking, most people who play this game are they kind of a certain thinking pattern, right? It's very selected for, and the louder, more influential people who still play this game, which technically I am someone who's probably predates quite the vast majority of players. I'm kind of curious what remains of all the people who started the game. I'm always wondering, but I don't stay in close circles enough to know who's still around since then. There are a couple of people who claim they are, so that's pretty interesting. I don't speak to them, but yes, it's a very closed thing, and it is what makes Neverwinter's perspective, I suppose, Cryptic's perspective, unique. So if that's for you, I can certainly say something about it. Most of the stuff that I say that is not for me now is for someone in Neverwinter. For myself, I think Cryptic and all the players who like to be catered to and pampered to and defend Cryptic's like follow through on dogmatic use while they're trying to transition into live service. I still consider them a developer and or like publisher, the people who are calling the shots, kind of out of touch with live service. It's still a growing pains thing, and I think a lot of the things fundamentally conflict with live service. However, that doesn't necessarily mean embracing live service and becoming cultured and touched, like being in touch with current live service models would be healthy or interesting changes for the game, because those who are playing the game are very strongly representatives and defends vehemently the stuff that they're so used to. That's kind of like the hard situation about talking about Neverwinter most of the time. You either don't break it worse than it is, or dogmatic to a fault where it can be very unique because it's dogmatic in a different way. It's kind of like a time capsule thing. I think most of the stuff that happens in Neverwinter feels like a time capsule philosophy that maybe doesn't exist in other games. So it's either embrace the trendy or preserve its orthodoxy, and those who play represents that type of line of thinking, which I had often been more of an embracer of change than trying to preserve. So I'm not necessarily a conservationist when it comes to video games. That's a little different from a preservationist. Preservationist is to make sure that those things that you made before are preserved in the game, but it allows new changes to the game. So the game evolves, all the subsequent things change, but the things of old remain. So it's not to replace things. It's preservation is to preserve what was while introducing what is. Conservationist, in my opinion, is when you're trying to do your all to make all the new things adhere to the old things. So keep, don't change things. Keep the same, add more things. And was often, I was a little bit open back in the day about being against that. Like, I do not think live service games embracing keeping the same thing running would ultimately be healthy for it. It's kind of like someone who, if you're much older and you're very comfortable with your life, then you have no incentive or you're not compelled to make any changes. And without changes, it can't get any worse, which is what they focus on, right? It can't get any worse, but it also can't get any better. And generally speaking, the human condition takes over. When things stay the same, boredom, complacency, and things start to trickle in. But if you're really old and you're stuck in your ways already, it's okay, because it's a slow depreciation, not a rapid depreciation. So the fear of losing something that works is usually the focus, not gaining something positive from changes, because a change can produce worse results than they are new results. And for me, I don't think live service games typically succeed when they fear change making it worse, as opposed to creating incremental changes and fundamental reform and renovation of their systems in order to keep players' interest or to generate players' interest. And those who may be refractory to change will ultimately embrace them because they adapt to them, right? Otherwise, you lose those people. And I think, to put a long story short on this, I think the majority of players are in that camp. They are individuals who are conservationists. They are not preservationists, and they are definitely not adaptive players. So You keep preserving the status quo and keep the trends in the same direction. In my opinion, the Celestial Gear is exactly that. It is it's a conservation of what makes these games these games. Cue the constant defense that you have to generate rarity in order to generate value, and that value is what generates incentive to keep on playing. That's true. Like, I'm not disagreeing with that. That is one way to do it. That is not the only way, nor is it a way that complements live service. Rarity things, long legacy things, they are archaic in the sense that this game is no longer that. The incentive to generate constant play is not adherent to consistently achieving things that are not meant to be replaced. You could kind of make it work if you're constantly introducing new subsystems, and those things have new subsystems with them that is not tied to the old subsystem in which you gain the things. So like, you can gain the Celestial Gear, and the next thing they introduce has nothing to do with gear, or it hasn't nothing to do with the current gear, but a new gear slot or a new thing. And one way to do this is kind of like a gacha game with new characters. Your old characters will continue to retain their value in the sense that you have acquired them, you invested in them, you built them. But then you have new characters which are not the same as the old characters, so you continue to expand your collection. And the way those games are designed, like Phantom X, is that they will challenge you to use all of your characters. Maybe like at first you start with 5-character team, like a 5-character team, and eventually you need a 10-character setup. So then you need to acquire 5 more characters. Now the system might still be the same between them, so they don't have to fundamentally create a new system, but it is the activation and value of all those things. In Neverwinter, it's a substitution. When you get a new Celestial Gear, you phase out old gear. So in a live service model, when the new gear comes out, there's always a counter argument for it. Well, you don't have to be all bent out of shape and angry that you don't have access to content now, because in 2 weeks or like in another 3 months, the gear is phased out, right? But that's the whole point of playing the live service game. You have eliminated the acquisition of the material. Despite, even if you play hundreds and hundreds of hours, it's going to hurt both ways. Those who don't want to do that will not play it, and it would be inaccessibility. Not only that, you can't even pay for it, which that's a very controversial topic. But if you pay for it, it will lower that. Some people, the conservation people, would say it would lower the value of that. It's like its value will depreciate no matter what. It's a live service game. In the future, the value of that thing is depreciated, right? So to me, that's a false understanding. I think the old dogmatic ways is to treat this game like it is an end game thing. But live service games don't necessarily have end game. They have current game. Everything is current game. And then when it's no longer current, it depreciates in value. So that's the conversation that keeps coming up, especially when they keep tweaking their newest, like, shiny iteration of their gear, which is the Celestial tier, which I don't imagine. I imagine it's going to keep going. Like, eventually most things are going to be Celestial, and maybe that's the end game, quote unquote. And what I mean by end game, I literally mean the end of Neverwinter Online. Because once you cap something out, it reaches its final point. I think that's probably the shortest way, the TLDR of my feelings regarding this recent module. I don't write reviews for these modules, but the idea is, if you keep treating a live service game like it's an end game, then the game ends. That's the philosophy, in my opinion. Live service games do not have end games. They have current games, whatever is current. So designing things, creating subsystems where you're constantly creating legacy, being current, and then preserving what they have had over the lifespan, in my opinion, is the gold standard for a live service. So the value that you gain in the current game does not fade as you're going further. So it has to have some sort of collection and application. But the problem with the archaic system, like Neverwinter, which is unique in its own right, is you can put in your bag. So your bag just shows that, oh, you've collected all these pieces, or you delete them because you ran out of bag space. You can collect all these relics, and that's one way to make people feel satisfied. Like someone could come up and say, oh, hey, do you have old gear from mod 13? It's like, oh yeah, here's the gear that I use. I didn't delete them or trash them yet, but they have next to 0 intrinsic value outside their sentimental value. In a live service game, the ones that stand the test of time, all of the things they've collected are still applicable and useful. They all scale up as well. So like when a new subsystem is introduced, it applies to everything they have ever accumulated up to this point. Now, there are different ways to apply this as well. Like, for example, if you're doing a gear system, all your current gear, the stuff that you've done previously, contribute to the success of future gear. This is not true in Neverwinter. And you might be thinking, well, it's sort of true. It's like, well, yes, it's sort of true in the sense that your current gear keeps you current, so you can try to gain access to the past gear can be used to acquire the current gear, and that is the closest thing to the live service model. That's what's keeping other people relevant, in the sense that you need the current gear in order to get future gear. That's perfectly fine. And that's the part of the live service that is still holds true, that's keeping Neverwinter going. However, that is like a iffy thing, right? Because I'm running characters that are like 4 gear sets behind and doing the accessible things, not the quote-unquote end game things. I think that is a very unfortunate cognitive dissonance, and I do not play really well with hearing people constantly defending, or not necessarily defending, saying the same thing without considering if there are any other alternatives. I think it is very distressing that the same comments argue against themselves. Like, for example, oh, hey, you have to create rarity because rarity creates lots of money, right? They're very sought after. When you limit supply with no demand, then they're worthless. So it's the demand that creates the value. So if your game continues to be argued as, oh, you need things to be rare so that they get incentivized to play, if no one is playing, then it doesn't matter what a rarity is. And then when you try to sell it, it doesn't matter if no one's playing. So there's an order of operation here, right? Demand is when you set the price, and in terms of market and all that stuff, it's demand, not supply. So if you inject supply and like everyone gets the gear, that still means there are people getting the gear and playing the currency. It doesn't have to be dependent on demand. So it's a cyclic argument. It's constantly arguing against itself. So whenever someone makes a comment or defends the choices, they rarely see it from more than one angle. They generally present one narrative, and then in the end of most of these discussions, it's typically like, oh, it is what it is. I just see it as this. It's like, well, try seeing it some other ways. Like, I think a great majority of comments is always, well, I think this, but rarely do they ever acknowledge or even communicate with each other about their ideas. Like, oh, well, it's like this. It's like, well, I think it's like this. Like, okay, it's everyone just stepping on a soapbox. It's like a room full of people gauging how big their soapbox is. At least in my opinion, that's kind of the feedback that I feel are most transparent to Cryptic, I suppose, if Cryptic even reads feedbacks or not. That's what you get. You have something, so they call the shots. I personally think if I had to weigh my hat in, constantly increasing rarity to shorten supply, to constantly short supplies and whatnot, that's sure, you can keep doing that, but then the game just, in my opinion, it's still the same people who don't have supply problems and all, and eventually it's everyone you play in the game will not have supply problems. So their argument would be, oh, I already got what I want from it, so making it rare incentivize other people, but all the people who already has it are the people who are selling, and then there's no one else. Everyone else has diminished to non-existence. So you won't even have prospective buyers anymore. It's buyers buying from buyers, or suppliers buying from other suppliers, and you just cycle the suppliers around, right? Like, oh, I have more money than you, I'll buy from you, but you already have a lot of money, and this person has a lot of money, so you're just buying from each other. And that's it. In my opinion, it kind of sounds like a closed off circle of wealthy people who just cycle money around, cycle their notoriety around, and then it's so tight, knitted so tight that, in my opinion, at some point the game just reaches an end cycle. I think wherever there's going, the type of construction that came from this module is habitually showing most of the flags of an end cycle. It's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing for those who become attached to virtual. It's a bad thing for those who become attached to something, right? It's not a good thing. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing for those who don't even have attachments. You can't form attachments if most of the stuff is inaccessible and it's gated by a gated community. Yep. So it's kind of a, I wanted to mention most of this because that's the current feelings or interpretations that I have. Not that it's a reflection of everyone. The idea is that I will probably be looking for something to replace this at some point, because I think the game has reached an end cycle, or like an end super cycle, or just maintaining things as opposed to something auspicious. We'll see though. I'll continue to do these until an announcement is made, I suppose. Maybe like in the next module or within the next year. All right. With that said, I want to do one of the characters. I still don't necessarily think doing all three characters is great. So we tried last time, we tried to use the Guardian fighter, right? Or the Vanguard, a Vanguard setup, and it was okay. It was like a slow-esque, a little less than an hour, I would say. It was pretty standard. And then the day before, we used our Sentinel instead, and it was definitely the second slowest. I think the Vanguard is still probably the slowest. The Sentinel was slightly faster, and then today we're just gonna run through with the Justicar, right? Just to swap it up. It shouldn't take more than an hour. I just wanted to embellish a little, bring a story in. Yeah, this past week I've been playing a new live service game. It's a gacha game as well, which is interestingly enough very satisfactory. Very satisfactory. And it was a solo playing. It's a solo structure. Some other things that I picked up, I left the Discord, so I might periodically go back to the Discord for like updates or something. I'll join back the Discord the next module or something and then keep up with the module thing. And during that period, I'll probably read the Discord for module related news and then leave the Discord again because I can't be constantly preoccupied with things I do not have control. Okay, so let's start. We're gonna head to the catacombs because weeklies are worth quite a lot now. And then of course we're stuck with the red ambush quests. It's a shame there's no patch notes for that. And these are 4 out of 10s because I think the quests, the assassins stuff just throws a wrench in everything. And Tenebrov was not adjusted either. Very middling. Very middling. Alright, let's do rations. Yeah. Yeah, the Justicar is, of course, no contest. The fastest of the 3 tank paragons. Oh, there was I forgot. I was in the middle of that thought. There was another comment that someone made in Discord. This is a public Discord, so all can see these comments. Someone was comparing like the mechanics of different classes, and then arguing for meritocracy. I don't know how that rationale works, but they were arguing that somehow the meritocracy is tied to the complexity of the class. So like, oh, make people work harder or add more dynamics, but they were more in the structure of make the class more complicated so that they can be even more, it can increase the skill ceiling of certain classes while providing an increase in its efficacy. Like, to me, that's a little bit backwards. Usually when you're talking about meritocracy, you're talking about your efficaciousness, like how efficacious you are in your performance. So that is irrelevant of its complexity, but how you're achieving that efficacy despite it being simplistic or complex, right? Like, there is a, if you're suggesting that taking out a garbage, like, let's say you want to learn how to take out garbage, right? And you become very, very skilled at taking out garbage. But the complexity of that action is not complex, or it doesn't stay complex. It actually becomes very simple to a person who practices well. So when someone makes a comment about meritocracy, meritocracy is about the performance, the efficacy, not the method in which it is being done. So this person made a dramatic argument where like, oh, make classes harder, more dynamic, but they also in process want to make the class also have a return on investment for its complexity. That's the opposite of meritocracy. And you might be saying, wait, that's not the opposite of meritocracy, because if you're doing something harder, right? If you're doing something harder and you're doing it well, doesn't that merit, isn't that more worthy of merit? That's more impressive. That is certainly more impressive. But meritocracy is about the end result, the efficacy of the thing. So if you increase the difficulty, and it increased the difficulty of a class, and that decreases the general usability of that class, that's a non-competitive process. It makes it less based on meritocracy. You have less people competing. And for those who are complicated and able to do that, it's like, well, then they choose the other class that is quote unquote easier to use because they're able to produce more performance out of it. Hence, gain more merit from their use. It's, in my opinion, one of the more common erroneous leap of logic when complexity is the sole way of introducing meritocracy. Things are difficult, but meritocracy is based on efficacy, like how much you achieve, not how difficult the thing is. So if you're doing something really, really hard and someone is doing something really, really smart, meritocracy favors the person who's smarter, not harder working. Or not harder working in the sense that the thing they chose to do is harder than the other person. So that to me is a great example of elitism and gatekeeping. So when you have the ability to do something, you want the thing to become harder so it becomes exclusive to you. And that exclusivity creates a non-competitive environment. You're most impressive and you have the most merits because you decided that the most appropriate thing to create competition is to make it so that only you or a select few can achieve results because the entry point of the method is too high. That's elitism. That's how oppression works. That's how monopolies work. It's the opposite of meritocracy. Meritocracy is when everyone is able to, there are enough functional methods that everyone can compete for an outcome. So you have many ways to produce the merit, and then people compete in that merit. Like, there are many ways to train how to run, and all of those are valid methods for running. And the outcome of the running performance is the merits they get. It's very backwards a lot of times when you hear ways to demonstrate skills and whatnot. I feel there is a huge disconnect with the environment of these types of games. Like, oh, you're playing a very, very hard class, therefore you should be merited and returned for being like acknowledged and rewarded for that. And what is that? Things become more efficacious, right? If you're playing a really hard class, it should also be very, very efficacious. If you're doing more with a class, it means you should also get more results, right? That's the opposite. That's not meritocracy. That's like non-competitive process. It's anti-competitive. So what's a great example of anti-competitive? Gatekeeping gear. That is anti-competitive. If you don't have access to gear or networking or not, then it's not based on meritocracy. What is that called? Nepotism. It's closer to nepotism. And that is the function of what they believe, like what a lot of people in this game believe is considered meritocracy, nepotism. At least in my opinion. Personally, it's closer. I'm not saying it's like an idealized way, but it's certainly no meritocracy. This game is not a meritocracy. And the idea that others like tried to introduce only embraces meritocracy. I mean, only embraces nepotism, not meritocracy, or legacy, right? Anything that you've done prior. And I honestly actually think that legacy, like nepotistic things, actually play well with live service models. I'm actually not even saying nepotism is bad or inappropriate for a game like this. Live service predicates to generational legacy building. Like, you want to build a legacy. All the things you collected should continue to add to the value of your investment in this game. It's like longs in investment strategies. You're diversifying in order to constantly feel like the value of your investment is continuing to increase. You're investing long in the game, and all of it should turn an interest rate, right? It should have a return on investment, a consistent return on investment. So I actually think what the idea, the mindset can be appropriate for this game. But when people offer an example, their examples typically illustrate something that is not the thing they're thinking of. Like supply and demand, for example. The misunderstanding of supply and demand when it comes to maintaining like a healthy economy, if there is one. Oh, here's the assassin I need to take out. I just need to take out one of these assassins. Very convenient. It's crazy. I still think it's difficult to understand that someone believes reducing competition by increasing difficulty somehow makes you makes the skill that you're working on higher value or higher in merit. If you have less competition in a pool, it's less merit because you have less competition. So meritocracy, whenever someone refers to a meritocracy, they are expecting that meritocracy is healthy for a game because it promotes player growth and higher competition. And then their strategy is often to reduce competition and decrease interest in the game. If you want increased interest and increased meritocracy, you level the playing field. You make it more accessible so people artificially and or sentimentally compete with each other. That's kind of how, like, it's a balance, obviously. But if you eliminate all of your competition because you so deem something arbitrarily acceptable, that is reducing merit. There is less competition. And what does that look like? It looks like people who think they're good, but they don't. It's not because they're good because there's competition. They're good because they stayed in the game the longest. And I don't mean like Neverwinter, but I'm talking about figuratively. If you have your skin in the game for the longest, you are by default have more merit in a system that constantly excludes competition. It's not encouraging competition because it's removing competition. It's actively reducing the population to the group that is most catered to. So yes, you can never know if you're good at a video game if the only form of relative that you have for most people are all the people you already know. It's one of those like situations where are you good if your relative stays the same the entire time? You wouldn't know. There's no competition. Like, did you improve if you're constantly playing with the same group of people? Not if the environment doesn't change. Like, if you're always playing the same people, then your environment must change. But if your status in your environment doesn't change, then you wouldn't know if you improved or not. Which, this is why I typically say, like, I played this game for a very long time. It's particularly because I played this game for a very long time, it's very difficult, or even irrelevant to demonstrate if I'm good at the game or not anymore, because you have very little in a way of comparison. You have that argument where, like, oh, you know, I always gain access to this stuff anyways. Like, well, yes, but because you always gain access to that stuff, you wouldn't know when you don't have access to that stuff. Like, this is would be a prominent person saying, oh, I have access to this stuff, so this is how it is, talking to someone who doesn't have access to it. That's like someone saying, oh yeah, I have a lot of money, so you just use money to make money. Meanwhile, the other person's like, but my problem is I don't have money to start with. Like, well, you just magically have money and then make money using money. That's the type of personality that I see more of than more of when it comes to chatting about how good things are in this game, or if they're acceptable or not. Let's see. How did this go again? Oops. Okay. Yeah, quick currency. Yeah, no one's intentionally, as a full disclosure, no one's intentionally being malicious or bad or good, or I don't think feelings were hurt or anything. That's just the classic brainstorming. I actually feel the Discord is there for people to voice their whatever they're saying, but talking to each other is kind of like talking by each other. Like, oh, I believe in idea A, and then the other person's like, oh, I think idea B is good. And it's like, here's why I think idea A is good, and here's why I think idea B is good. When they're talking, they're not interacting and comparing and contrasting idea A with idea B. It's double downing on whatever idea that they want. It's like, okay, fair enough. And I was there to collect all the ideas. Granted, I don't really have ideas of my own, so that is certainly a problem. I'm not invested in this enough to communicate any particular idea. I think introducing new subsystems is a potential win-win, right? You lock in the gear, that's perfectly fine. Introduce a new subsystem. And what I mean by introduce a new subsystem is, hey, look, now you have one new gear slot, and here are the new things for that gear slot. And then we'll do the same. We'll power creep this gear slot until the next gear slot drops, which then when the gear slots are locked in, they won't ever feel like you're resetting or replacing anything, right? That leads to level customization. But the thing is that has other things that require attention, and that's balance, right? You can have unintentional multiplicative problems. You might even have people who are underwhelmed by its scaling or its impact on performance, aka the meritocracy. So things like, oh, if they introduce this gear, how much stats should it introduce? Well, there are other ways to make it appear like they're impacting. So like, say the developers already know that they're gonna power creep the gear, take those stats and put it into a new gear slot. and that increment will still be preserved. So whatever incremental increase that you were thinking people would have, it can be presented in a new gear slot. That is like the lowest bottom line way to transition from whatever model they're using now. It's like, oh, this adds another extra percent, or this adds another extra 0.5%, right? That kind of thing. But your gear doesn't disappear. That gear that you're working on for 200 runs, or unlike the person who's lucky and have accessibility, it stays there. It doesn't get replaced. Something else gets added to it. So if they're working on new subsystems, that'd be kind of nice. Now, the one thing that I would say is I don't think Cryptic is a group that works a lot on back end, largely because how old this game is now. So if you're adding a new gear slot, it might not actually be that simple, right? That might be a back end interaction. They have to check for back end interactions and all that in their patchwork. I imagine the game code is pretty patchwork at this point, so it's very not trivial. It's not a trivial thing to do compared to using all the existing things and then scaling up the baseline characteristics of the existing thing. I would imagine. I'm not a programmer or anything, so I couldn't even imagine what the game code looks like now. I'll be genuinely surprised. Yeah, I think I would be genuinely surprised if they introduce a new subsystem in this game before the end of cycle for the game. Something to collect that is not being replaced or substitute or being subjected to power creep, supply demand, or accessibility. Right. What they're doing now is they keep scaling the same systems, and that's my biggest critique about the Celestial gear here. Constantly producing more and more inaccessibility. Your entire player base already has either have accessibility to that, or those who don't will leave. That's more likely to leave. So you keep making these repeated over and over again loss of value. I mean, I kind of get it though. Like one model that's fantastic about this is it's a car salesman. It's a car salesman, right? You're not buying a house, you're buying fancy cars. But you're buying cars. These are cars. Cars that are just as expensive as a house. But there's a big difference in this analogy, which carries forward. Right? This will ultimately diminish in value because of being replaced and utility. House might be something mandatory and less replaceable over time. And even then, house also appreciates and depreciates in value. I'm not saying there isn't anything that doesn't, right? But a lot of things that appreciate in value, that's a storage of value, are things that do not necessarily, they're not necessarily attached to utility. Like gold, you know, like precious metals. But precious metals aren't the only source of sentimental value in video games. Sentimentalism is very powerful too. And the way they introduce Celestial gear is a loss of sentimental value, as well as being conflicting with live service model, with utility. So the things that they have that they're trying to inculcate and create sentimentalism as well as value depreciate naturally and also gets replaced. So you lose sentiment, you lose the sentimentalism game, the investment game, So oftentimes, you know, houses are incredibly valuable not for the sake of its literal value. It's both its sentimental value, the time you spent in the house, the things you did to the house, and whatnot, and it can possibly appreciate in value. Gear cannot do that at the moment. There are like other games releasing a fashion item has that sentimental value more than gear thing. So constantly investing in creating a, in my opinion, a disagreeable experience soon is what I feel like is being out of touch with a live service game. Like, whatever they're doing with the celestial gear, it's guaranteed, in my opinion, 90% of the time, it's guaranteed to have an awful feeling later down the road. Because you're not forward investing in anything. You're losing your investment. You're guaranteed to lose your investment of your time in the future. There's no preservation of the value. For the sake of conserving the incredible, arrogant, stubborn design of philosophy, for that principle alone, you lock players, in my opinion, you tend to lock players in losing value over time, understanding how to lose value with time. I'm not a financial expert, obviously, but I am a person who has incredibly reasonable finances and understanding of how to diversify and maintain appreciating value while time goes by. And this model that people keep talking about and reductively taking providing advice for, not it. It's shocking because some people hate on, or they tend to have this disagreement with gacha games. Gacha games still have more accumulative, appreciable value, both sentimentally as a game format, than Neverwinter. Hot take, but it really does. Like opening a pack and collecting like 10 things and having duplicates of things, but those things that you're keeping continue to be something. This game does not. If it does, then that's cool. I'm okay with that. You know, like maybe this is the only piece of celestial gear in the entire series. That's fine. That also means the game is reaching an end cycle for gear or something. Like, hey guys, this is the last tier of celestial gear. So whatever you get here, it's really sought after because we're not going to introduce anymore. Instead, we're going to introduce gear that doesn't exist yet, and we'll work on that. That's how you lock in, you know, when you buy gold, the gold doesn't change over time. It doesn't get replaced very commonly over time. Now, there is a bit of a disclaimer there because there are other forms of stores of value. In this game, gear is not an effective storing of value because it has utility. Utility tends to take away from its it's tied to its value, the utility of the thing you're looking at. A collection is something else. It's a store of value. You don't collect gear in this game. I know some people say, like, well, you do collect gear. It's like, well, you collect. Okay, you do collect gear, but you don't collect and keep. You collect and replace. So whatever you collected, its value is replaced. You can sell your stories, which is what people tend to emphasize as a silver lining. But then you can tell people how you spent hundreds of hours and hundreds of runs collecting this gear once in a blue moon, and what do you have to show for it? I like to think that those people, what they have to show for it, are people that were worth them. You know, people that shared experiences, had stories. That's a store of value. Stories, feelings, running together, playing other games together as a result of this game, that's an investment in people. People are a store of value, not the gear. So constantly, there's this like consistent bickering about trying to make gear a store of value in this game. Totally disagree. And I disagree, not really subjectively because I don't have those things, really. I guess that would be subjective of not having those or not desiring those things. But if you want to store value, it means the gear doesn't depreciate over time, or it depreciates less over time. So the argument is much like everyone else's argument. Make it super rare and don't replace it. Like, okay, that's acceptable. So I'm guessing that's what route they're going. Despite being a live service game. So the question is, if that is becoming a store of value, what are you going to do next? How are you going to introduce gear and incentivize players to play next? And that's what I'm curious about. So I'm looking forward to next module because I want to know is the introduction of the celestial tier, meaning that the next module is going to emphasize something that isn't those things. I could be a little cynical and say that no, it's just they're just going to introduce new gear that is an alternative to the existing gear, and then people are going to argue about which gear is easier to get, right? Easier to get, hence less merit. Again, that's not how that works, but I get really exhausted, in my opinion, when people think that what you own is an example of meritocracy. It's meritocracy is what you do. Hence, not a lot of games are not purely based on meritocracy. You want to know what a game that's purely based on meritocracy? Go play a competitive game. Especially a competitive game that has an incredibly large audience that offers an unlimited way of executing a success. That's a meritocracy. So I get a little up in ante when people present ideas that contrast with the outcome of what they want. Right. What's a meritocracy in this game? No classes. You play a single character and has access to every single class. I mean, that's what other games have now embraced. Your character is a vehicle for all classes. And then what's another form of meritocracy? All dungeons have equal scalar difficulty, whether you play alone, with 5 other people, or with 10 other people. Every single dungeon, trial, and any content released can be played in the form that best represents what that other person's skill is, right? If you're a loner, then you play all the content alone. So there will be dungeons, there will be a master solo version, a master advanced version, right? Or like an advanced solo version and a normal solo version, along with a 5-party team and a 10-party team version of it. And the meritocracy will sort itself out because then all the people who play solo can compare each other, sort of, play solo. And when you remove all the class types from the investment, right, from legacy, right? What is legacy built into this game? Your class. The class that you invest most in is a legacy. You have legacy skills. So if you force someone to play a class that they don't have legacy skills in, that's normalizing to meritocracy. What is another true meritocracy, like another type of meritocracy? When you force people to play a certain way, and either they play it well or they don't. That's the opposite in the situation. Like, oh, hey, this boss can only be completed with a rogue class, but there's nothing that restricts the person's gear or everyone's at a level playing field. Everyone's loadout is exactly the same. That's a skill-based meritocracy, which I can't fit into this model, because gear collecting things, amassing wealth and stuff, that is the opposite. It gives you transferable advantages. Right? Nepotism is another way. Entitlement. People, your predecessors, as well as transferable skills. However, if you want to go towards that, make all the characters playable in any class. Remove respecking. Actually, all the class have access to all the other class. Every player has everything globally defined, and then, you know, when the game suddenly everyone is 100% of players are rogues, then you know from meritocracy that there's an imbalance in your rogue class, for example. I'm picking on rogues because that was one of the things that the person was talking about. But yes, that's how you would figure out if the merit is true. When everyone has the same accessibility, you can either force the same accessibility on everyone, or you offer them so much accessibility that everyone can succeed in their preferred way to achieve the same performance, which the game already kind of does. Honestly, if you invest in a class, you can, they're trying to balance the performance out between all the classes, so they take like the highest potential and compare it to like the average potential. So then, is rogues average potential exceeding the highest potential of barbarians, for example? So then they would they would tune down, say, the rogue in order to match the performance of that. That's responsive, right? That's responsive, and that's something that's very normalized for how people fix things. It's after the fact. So if a barbarian plays simpler than a rogue, it's after the fact. And to make rogues harder or easier because another class is harder or easier is after the fact. It doesn't normalize merit. It creates elitism, discrimination, and bias. If you think the barbarian is easier than the rogue, then there's a good chance that you either played one more than the other, or you think or bias one towards the other. While the way to get true meritocracy is a player has full access to both, and they choose what they choose because they have accessibility to both, which you could argue this game does allow, because you can make as many characters as you want. And if you choose to play a rogue, then you choose to play a rogue. What constitutes that the person has more merit is they chose the thing that produced the best results for them. And if they perform better overall because of that choice, that's their merit, right? Making a class harder because you think is easier for other people, that's anti-competitive practice. It's the opposite of meritocracy. So weird. so weird when I was reading some of the stuff. It's like, oh yeah, you know, yeah, I see what you mean. Raise the skill cap of this class so that it's a level playing field for the results. I'm like, so how does that increase, how does that normalize merit? So if your class just happens to overperform and the idea is you nerf that class so that you have to work harder for it, that increases your merit, that actually decreases your merit. So now the players have to work harder to produce the outcome, right? And it is what the outcome is how merit is evaluated, not the process. Merit is rarely sensitive to the process. I should know because, or that sounds a little biased. Like my personal bias, I should know because I do things not because they are the easiest to do. I do things because I can. Right? Like, oh, why aren't you playing this? It has the highest min-max potential stuff. Like, it's because I enjoy playing it. Like, why cover Neverwinter when you're feeling so negative about the module? It's because I can. I gain experience, right? I can talk about it. If I wanted to say or make a commentary, right? I have to check something because it's getting late. Okay. Yeah, like for example, why stream Neverwinter when you could be streaming Phantom X? It's like, well, I wanted to complete this. Merit. I recorded myself completing the thing, and that's all I get. And that's the value I get from it. What other people think it's worth is that's the part that people care about. Right? Like, why record Neverwinter when you could be playing, I don't know, what's something like this, that World of Warcraft? It's merit. uh it's not nepotism or legacy. So weird. That's my thoughts about Neverwinter in the last week. I went on Discord, got a lot, tried to gather some impressions, and I don't think the community has changed at all. They haven't evolved. Not, again, not a bad or a good thing. If you really like what I'm saying about what other people feel, definitely give the game a try. Like, are you one of those people who love the idea of spending a lot of time investing because you make good friends along the way, right? You hook up with some peeps, grind your way to some gear, and then it's the memories, the legacy that you're building with other people that drives you to love doing this. Yes, that in itself has merit, right? Because you and your friends or the people you're working with have a shared goal. And that shared goal is to acquire the experience, which cannot be replaced. At least you think it cannot be replaced. That's true merit, in my opinion. Or at least one of the many ways. And before someone says, no, it's how expensive your gear is and how rare your gear is. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, sort of. It's part of the equation. we could start going into a discussion. Is loyalty a form of merit too? I don't know. That would be an interesting question. Like if you played a game for a very long time, is it the act of playing the game a very long time a form of merit? And should that merit be rewarded, right? Because I think what motivates the vast majority of people who make loud commentary on what should and should not happen in Neverwinter is often, should that be recognized? Like, does merit have entitlement? Purely speaking, for myself, merit does not entitle you to rewards. You are not rewarded for merit. Like a truly meritocracy is that the thing you do creates the essence of merit, like contributing to society, contributing to community. The merit speaks for itself. Hence why most of the stuff that we play, the video games that we play, are not true meritocracy. And rarely is a game solely based on merit system. Otherwise, I feel like the world would have a very different perspective on what entitlement means. Yeah, true merit, it's the result of your actions. Whining, complaining, talking about how to stack things in your favor or stack things against your favor or nerfing other people's forms of merit. That's someone who wants nepotism. Nepotism and legacy and loyalty. Entitlement, right? If you're really loyal to a game, you played a game for a very long time, it should reflect that, right? That is backwards, in my opinion, from the logic behind merit. You get more merit because you continue to do your best with whatever is available. If that other person does this thing really well, you either join them to prove that you can do it better, or not sit in the corner, sulk, and say that my experience is different from yours, therefore my experience requires more attention than your experience. That's nepotism. I played this game for a very long time, etc., etc. I've been working on, like, for example, if I use my argument that I spent over 6 months trying to get the, what was it called? The Ring of Wind, or the Wind Ring from a Hardcore Vault, and that entitles me to demonstrate that I worked really hard, but it didn't drop. Well, it didn't drop. That's it. That's how merit works. Like, you didn't get it, so the result did not happen. Someone else did. And then you could be saying, oh, but that's RNG. It's like everyone was applied the same RNG, so it's okay. I'm not saying I'm okay with that, because I don't necessarily believe that true meritocracy exists ideally in video games and anywhere, actually. I don't even think it's anything idealistic like that, like presented like an ideology, is erroneous in reality, because the human condition would dictate that it's a combination of many things. Otherwise, these things wouldn't coexist already. Like, for example, your parents are your legacy. When you are born into a family, you already have legacy. Being human and living, being a mortal creature that biologically have to reproduce, have already removed pure meritocracy. Now, you could conceptualize it though, and it's possible to somewhat conceptualize it in video games as well. And there are varying degrees of that, and that's what I'm kind of acknowledging. I'm trying to balance out what others are saying with the idea that a game, yes, has been pushed quite often as a way for true meritocracy to exist. Like, make a game that's purely everyone's on the same level. That's a competitive game. CS:GO is close to a meritocracy. Fortnite, I guess, like your competitive games are there. So does that make you feel good? I mean, yes, for those who want that. Now, can there be a truly merit-based Western fantasy MMO? Honestly, I don't know what that looks like. The inherent nature of an MMO, like having gear that like scales, having levels, level progression, no hard resets, that is nearly the antithesis of meritocracy, because how well you do is also based on how long you've been playing the game. But you want how long you playing the game not give you any edge when you're playing the game, right? But that edge that you get from your legacy and whatnot makes it so that other people will look at you differently. And then when you add gear on top of that, and like currency, demand, wealth, all that stuff, then you're no longer be able to evaluate your merit against someone who is. Now, there is a way to equilibrate this. You only compare yourself to another person who has similar legacy. So, for example, if someone played for 10 years and another person played for 10 years, that at least removes the time issue, provided that they played relatively within a statistical distribution of normalized, and then both of them continue to amass the same amount of wealth, and then you compare them like your rival. If you have a rival in a game that has strong legacy building, that's probably the closest thing that you're going to have. Making reductive comparisons between you and a population that you don't understand or even participate in, and then educating them in what is fair and what isn't fair, that's not meritocracy. That's like real life. That's closer to reality. It's like saying it's okay that you don't have money because I have money. That to me illustrates a lot of the feedback when people talk about what's not working and what's working in Neverwinter. I have this already. I have all these things, so it's not a big deal. Just realize that the other person, it might be a big deal, but you don't even acknowledge that. You sit there and you say, oh, I've always just considered this. Don't worry. Just like, someone can sound considerate but ignorant, and unintentionally ignorant, versus empathetic. Like, there's a difference basically between a narcissistic advice and empathetic advice. A narcissist will tend to say things like, oh, I consider this as a normal thing. So if you are having trouble with this, just take a break, right? Like, just take a break, breathe. Like, but they don't have this. They don't have what you have. It's polite, yes. It's great. It's useful advice indirectly that you advise someone to take a break, and that might lead them to have a wonderful, like a much more manageable thing. But that advice comes from being a narcissist, not coming from advice of understanding where they're coming from. You did not acknowledge the nature of their frustration and therefore how it's connected to taking a break. You tell people to take a break because you already come from a perspective that you already have all these things, and if you don't have them you would be frustrated, so you projected your own emotions like, yeah, I would be frustrated too if I didn't have that stuff, so I would take a break. Like, well, yeah, but you didn't know what they have. That's a narcissistic approach, and that to me is what I read most of the time in the Discord. Like, it's not malicious, but it's also not empathetic. When someone says like, I don't want to run 100 times to get a celestial piece of gear, and your comment is, oh, I already got it because I ran 100 times too and I got mine and it wasn't as bad for me because I found it accessible. You shouldn't have to worry about it. It's fair. That's narcissism. You're saying it from your perspective. You didn't recognize anything about what that other person said, right? I'm wrapping up here today because it's the end of the stream. I think we're good with our one character. I've been keeping up with all 3 characters, but it's a nice chill thing, you know, to get 100. I got one more week. Oh, and also for the record, these rewards are one-time claim, right? One-time claim, and they do not say it. As far as I know, it's still one-time claim. So here's another quality control issue, in my opinion, QC issue. Thumbnails are constantly being repurposed, and they're not accurate in their description. So like, in no way did I receive 150 trade, like 1,500 trade bars for completing 3 characters on this. This is a one-time claim, and they say this milestone has been claimed, but there are certain milestones that are multi-claimed, right? So the like anything above are multi-claim. Actually, maybe here's where I would give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I just didn't read properly. Let's see if I didn't read properly. Like, if there's any indicator that the things at the top you get multiples of and the things at the bottom you don't, right? So in order to confirm this, right, I did not get the bars, but I can tell you that I've had multiples of or these overload things. I have so much random things sitting around because I don't even manage my bags anymore. That's a complacency. That's on me. I could have sworn. Maybe I'm making it up. I don't know. I know at least these things, like the first thing, it goes to all 3 characters. This does not. Right. This goes to all 3 characters. I think this might possibly. But TLC. Just an example. Let's see. Let's grab a thumbnail. What is an interesting looking thing? What's an interesting looking place? Yeah, I'm done for the day. I'm gonna try to rest. It's been some long days. I've been having a lot of fun with Phantom X. Slow gaming live service games just seem like I suppose a little bit to my speed these days. Comparatively. That's a really cool location. I really like this map. This map looks this map is fantastic. Like the way it looks. And how like complex and interesting it looks. Oh, you know what? We could get like the mob that I haven't done anything of. We just pretend, just stand here and pretend like we... Wait. That's pretty good. Nope. There it is. Neutral. At least it doesn't just like randomly gank you. You know? Like the assassins. Alright folks. That's a wrap for today. 9th week. It's business as usual. I'll give it a 5, right? Sorry, foregone conclusion that this module, in my opinion, is well below average. I don't think it's well below average. And I usually take these time to do some commentary on Neverwinter. So if you find the commentary disagreeable, know that it's perfectly fine to find things agreeable or disagreeable. This is commentary, it's not fact, right? I like to offer a different perspective on things, or if I have a particular perspective, I try to entertain a different perspective. Otherwise, I would run out of things to talk about. I would say the same thing over and over again. You know? Like this map is great. They really repurposed and leverage so many different assets to like coherently put things together. This is lovely. I think this one is pretty nice. Very nice corner. Yeah. So if you're gonna watch this later, thank you. Always appreciate it. As always, feel free to follow along, join in. It is a free to play game. Minimum I guess play to win aspects. You can get up to speed in less than a month. It's kind of funny because now I'm thinking about Phantom X, how long that is taking me. You get up to speed probably in a month's time as well. Yeah. There's, you know, some time gated stuff as for live service, but generally not much to keep you from getting up to date at your own speed. Yeah. And then you can drop your own commentary then, and hot takes and whatnot. I love to hear different perspectives. I mean, it genuinely puts a smile on my face when someone says, "Oh, I love this game despite it all," or someone else would say, "Well, you're wrong. This is the only way." It's like, okay, I will make sure to talk about that. I can highlight other people's perspectives, provided they offer their time to share it with me. Otherwise, I make commentary on the things I observe. It's not like I talk to these people. They openly make these comments, make these exchanges in a public place. So I would like to think that they have taken accountability for all the things that they say. And I do too. I may be talking way beyond my depth about how I interpret meritocracy versus like nepotism and legacy building. And I made some loose analogies to finance and like market supply and demand stuff. They're very cursory. I do not work professionally in any of these fields, but I like to think, if I want to say as humbly as possible, I like to think I command enough knowledge of many of these things that in life it doesn't have to be all or none for most things. Like a video game does not have to be purely based on merit. to be enjoyable to me. It's often the word that I would say is, am I agreeable enough for you? My friends are friends because they do, like, they are sufficient in many of the things they do, and it is the body of all the things that they are sufficient that we become friends. It's not you put whoever you meet, whatever you play, in a box, and that it has to meet all those idealisms in order for you to enjoy things. So I still quite enjoy Neverwinter. I log in every day to do a random queue, which I will do after this in some time. Eat my dinner, write more papers, my like little projects on the side, read YouTube, and keep up with things, right? And then I continue language learn. So feel free. You're all welcome to share your grievances, I suppose. I would love to proliferate times like these with that. I think playing Neverwinter outside of the first 4 weeks, right? The first 4 weeks is when there's things I can talk about, because I don't run trials or master versions over and over again to like provide like reactionary content. I fill the time up with commentary. At least I try to make it related to Neverwinter. I think that's what I'm going to do moving forward. So Neverwinter has moved most of the discussion to their Discord server. If you want to see what's going on in Discord, feel free to join Cryptic's Neverwinter's official Discord. Chill around, talk about things. I mean, there's still one more week, so I'll probably look at the Discord and bring another form of commentary discussion for the next week. And that's probably what I'm going to do moving forward. Like 4 months from now, roughly 4 months from now, there's going to be a new module. And I do the same thing, 10 weeks. And I think I will use the Discord now to find something to talk about in Neverwinter. It kind of brightens up my day. It provides commentary while I do this, because the experience itself doesn't remarkably change that much. I don't remember the last time there was a new subsystem change. Meanwhile, many of the games that I currently still play, their subsystems continue to change consistently. In fact, I was looking at the roadmap for Phantom X, and there's a lot going on. This not so much. But what I do enjoy are the things that do change, which is like the landscape, the stories, right? The gear does not that much. In fact, sometimes it's a moot point because their accessibility is non-existent, right? That's kind of my talking point today. All right, that's it for week 9. 1 more week to go, and I'll make some, this type of segment. Closing remark until the next 4 months, the next module 32. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, have fun, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye bye.